Today on LA Currents, I Believe the Children Are Our Future is the beginning of a popular song and is the anthem, so to speak, of the Children's Institute. We chat with their president and CEO about their brand new facility in Watts and the programs they offer benefiting children and families. Next, the Union Rescue Mission is a known safe haven for LA's homeless population. CEO Reverend Andy Bales shares his insight on the topic of homelessness and what the mission is doing to help put an end to the crisis. But to start, the Community Safety Partnership is a relationship-based policing model designed to help build public trust, reduce crime, and create new relationships between police and the neighborhoods they serve. LAPD Deputy Chief Emada Tingirides is here to provide more insight on this partnership and how it is changing communities.
As cities across the nation deal with rising crime, Los Angeles is using community policing to diffuse tensions. Joining us to discuss this issue is Deputy LAPD Chief Emada Tingirides. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about the work that you're doing in the Community Safety Partnership Bureau.
The Community Safety Partnership Bureau started in 2011, and we have dedicated police officers assigned to public housing developments in city parks that have experienced a high rate of crime and in the past a lack of trust with law enforcement. Our officers are in the community building relationships, building trust, and looking at some of our quality of life issues in crime, utilizing a public health approach and their relationships to make change in the community.
Wow, interesting. So what's been the reaction from the community to the work that's being done?
The reaction from the community from when we started to where we're at now has been transformational. This program was the brainchild of civil rights attorney Connie Rice, working with the LAPD and the Housing Authority to really address some of the cause and tension that was occurring in these communities. These are communities that have had tension with law enforcement for decades, and to have a civil rights attorney come in and look at what the crime was in those communities, but also look at the relationships between law enforcement and the community was the premise for the Community Safety Partnership Program. And 10 years later, we've been able to build those relationships. The officers have learned how to humanize the community, and the community humanized the officers. We've been able to address some of the quality of life issues, working in partnership with the council district offices, our schools, our nonprofits, to make a huge change in the communities that need us the most.
Mm-hmm. Were the results seen immediately, or did they happen very gradually?
The results happen very gradually. It takes time to build that relationship. It takes time for the officers to really gain an understanding of what's going on in the community. So it was incremental. And as trust was built and friendships were forged between the officers and communities, we began to see change.
That's wonderful. So I'm curious, how does policing and what you're doing, how does it diffuse racial tensions?
Any time that you're willing to understand the cultures of the community that you're working in, and you have an organization and a department that now reflects the community that you're working in, all of that helps build trust and relationships and diffuse tension. One of the reasons why this program was so important and placed in some of our most vulnerable communities was because of a lack of trust and the tension between law enforcement and the community. Mm-hmm. And when the officers set out understanding that they weren't going into these communities to suppress it, but they were actually going into these communities to understand it and make a change and work together, that diffuses that tension and that allows a window for us to come together to make change in the community.
Mm-hmm. And those changes happen little by little. When you talked about distrust, talk about breaking down those barriers.
It starts with understanding. I have told my officers, it's okay sometimes to say I'm sorry. Not necessarily sorry for what I have done to you, but I'm sorry if you feel in the past you've been mistreated by law enforcement. The word sorry is so powerful. And if you work with the truth and reconciliation component to that and understand that hurt, you can begin to heal. And when you heal and build that trust and relationships, you can slowly begin to make change in the community. A lot of the communities that our officers are working in have been forgotten, and they have been victimized. And they've been victimized not only by some of the social systems or the lack of resources in the community, but there's been a historical tension between law enforcement and some of the communities that our CSP officers are working in. This policing philosophy, we are in our 11th year of this, and I've seen the transformation. Our police officers have seen the transformation. And sometimes it just starts with the words, "I'm sorry."
Wow, that's powerful. On a personal level, when you first decided to join the police department, what did your friends say?
I had a lot of friends say, "You're too nice to be a police officer." And at times I felt maybe I am, but really a police officer is a peace officer. And it's our job to go out and be respectful and police constitutionally and engage with individuals on a human nature. And I knew that my demeanor and what I stood for and my integrity is what makes LAPD what it is. And I decided to become a police officer after the Rodney King incident. And I felt really compelled to want to go back to my community and build that relationship and that trust. I also saw what gangs and crack cocaine had done to the community of Watts, and I felt compelled to want to get back there and help resolve those issues and make the community that I'm so proud of better.
Since the unrest in 1992, what changes have you seen in the police department?
I've seen so much change within LAPD. There's been so many changes as it relates just to technology, to us adopting the body-worn video and digital in-car video. We now have an Inspector General's office that has an oversight of some of our policies and procedures. The LAPD has really engaged and deepened their understanding and actions as it relates to community policing. The LAPD now reflects the community that we serve. A lot has changed since 1992, and one of our core values is quality through continuous improvement. We've looked at ourselves internally, we've asked the community externally to help make us better. One of the things that we do within the Community Safety Partnership Program is community sentiment surveys. We ask the community, how do you want to be policed? What is it that you would like to see your officers doing in your community? The fact that we take that feedback and we implement it and put it into action and then go back and ask, how are we doing, has been a huge transformation in policing.
Do you think social media at all plays into this?
I think social media plays out as it relates to any information being shared. And I think that when you have technology at your fingertips and information comes in so quickly,
yes,
oftentimes that information can be slanted. Oftentimes that information may be missing critical information that the community needs in order to make decisions on where they're going or what their plans are throughout the day. So I think that social media, when used responsibly, can be very beneficial for law enforcement as it relates to sharing information. We also use social media when we're looking for a suspect, and it can be very, very beneficial for us. So I think that it's a double-edged sword, social media, and we all have a responsibility in ensuring that we put out critical and accurate information, and in doing so, we better serve the community.
Excellent. Well, this has been a very enlightening conversation. Thank you so much, Deputy Chief Emada, Deputy LAPD Chief Emada Tingirides. We appreciate everything that you do.
Thank you so much for having me.
For over 100 years, underinvestment in racist policies have resulted in lack of opportunity and poverty in underserved communities. The Children's Institute supports children and families healing from these traumatic experiences. President and CEO Martine Singer talks to us about the work and supportive programs offered to bridge this gap. There's an old saying that goes, "We repeat what we do not repair," which is one of the reasons I am so delighted to be here today at the Children's Institute in their brand new facility in Watts. And I'm joined by the President and CEO, Martine Singer. So nice to be here.
Thank you.
What are some of the things that the Children's Institute is devoted to doing?
We work with the whole family, 2 generations, 3 generations, whoever is living in the household. Because children live in a family and the family lives in a community, and we really have to address what's going on in all of those spheres: home, school, community. So we do a lot of services for children and families. We have an enormous preschool program that includes home visitation. We also do a lot of mental health services. We do services for families to provide resources. A lot of care coordination is really kind of what it boils down to. So the core of our service model is to address trauma. We know that trauma can really hurt minds and bodies. So early trauma can cause not only mental health problems, but it also affects the developing body and it can cause lifelong health problems. So intervening early where there's trauma is critically important to changing that trajectory and not repeating generation after generation of trauma and all of the results that come from it.
We can't hesitate to talk about this space that has just recently been opened.
Right.
What was the necessary elements that had to come into play to make this place, and why is it here, and what is it hoping to do?
Well, you know, we were just talking about all of the things that you need to recover from trauma.
Sure.
And one is hope. And to me, certainly to Frank Gehry, who designed the building, light is hope. He said a beautiful thing at the dedication of the space. He sort of looked up and he said, you know, light is free. And all you need to do is poke some holes and let the light in. And of course, not as easy as he makes it sound, but if you look up and you see the space that's really cathedral-like, the light plays such a huge part in the power of this building. And it is a place that's really a sanctuary for the community, for the children and families, and for our staff who come to work here. I think the other significance of this building is that, believe it or not, there are not a lot of places to meet in this community. There are just not a lot of convening spaces. So what we've done is, yes, it's a Children's Institute facility. We occupy it happily, gratefully, but it's also open to the public in the sense that if you are a community member and you have a Girl Scout troop and you want to meet, you can meet here. If you're the Watts Gang Task Force, which is one of our roommates, we call them, that occupies a space with us here, and they've been meeting over Zoom, of course, lately. But when they come back to in-person meetings, they'll meet here. You can reserve space free of charge and have your meetings, your programs. And so in that sense, the building really symbolizes the partnership that we have with other community organizations, with the public sector, and with our neighbors.
And I love the fact that it's also a celebration of the vibrancy of this community. I mean, with all of the art on the wall, you know, coming from the Watts art area, and this is just, it just has a real feeling that it belongs to the community as well as supporting the community.
Yes, I think that the art, I'm glad you mentioned that, because it really is almost a tangible link between the building and our intentions in designing it and the community itself. Every piece of art here was curated by the Watts Towers Cultural Center, as you mentioned, and they curated an amazing group of paintings that you'll see throughout the building. They're beautiful, but they're also inspirational. We have QR codes under every work of art that you can look at, and it takes you to our website, more information about the work. It really is art to be understood and admired in whatever way makes sense to you, and then there's an opportunity to learn more.
So we were talking about the programs that you currently have, but and as you said, it, you know, as time passes, needs adapt and communities change and things. So who are the clients these days and what are their needs?
Primarily, we do two things. We do early education and mental health. And what that really means, what it comes down to, is we believe that educational success and emotional well-being are the foundation that will enable people to achieve economic mobility, to get out of poverty. We want to support you to do these things that at each stage of life are the key milestones. And they are cumulative. I wish I could say that going to Head Start is going to guarantee you a great job 20 years from now. Not sure I could make that claim, but I know that if you get the Head Start you need to start school, and you're reading at grade level in 3rd grade, and you're graduating from high school, and you're hitting these marks, your odds are much better, cumulatively.
And one of the things that I thought was spectacular that I think everyone should have, not just in the Children's Institute, is these fathering programs.
Yes.
How to be a good father.
Well, we're very proud of Project Fatherhood. It's a program that we developed right here at Children's Institute about 25 years ago. And it was really in response to this idea that mainly in the child welfare system, the child protective system, the focus, understandably, is very much on the mother's family, services to the mother. There's certainly a lot of fathers that want to be involved in their children's lives, and they're prevented for a variety of reasons. So we saw an opportunity to create a real brotherhood of men who experience some of these difficulties and want to have a better relationship with their child. And you see in our fatherhood groups men of all ages, from all different parts of town, who maybe in another context would not be able to speak to each other, right? But once they get in that room, all of the defenses come down and they are a brotherhood.
It's been the Children's Institute since 1980, but prior to that, it was the Big Sisters League.
That's right.
And a very unique individual here in Los Angeles launched this whole thing, Minnie Barton. What a story there.
Yes. She was, I believe, the first female probation officer in the county of Los Angeles, and had a vision to help women who had young children and no place to go. I think a lot of organizations like Children's Institute were started by women. Draw whatever conclusion you like, but oftentimes it was women who, of all walks of life, saw a need and felt impelled to fill it. And like other great organizations, we have evolved with the times. So whereas originally we were in downtown Los Angeles, that's where most of the population lived, now you'll see most of our sites and our preschools, including this site, are in South LA.
I also love the idea that you were helping people who were starting careers in the mental health world.
Yes.
You're bringing in students that are learning what it really means to be part of that realm.
We have a very robust training and internship program for graduate level students in social work, marriage and family therapy, and psychology. And yes, it is a wonderful training ground because many of them end up wanting to work here, and we're thrilled by that because we know them, they know us, they know, the practices that we use, and they can hit the ground running. The other thing we're very proud of is hiring people that have been recipients of our services.
Oh, wow.
So for example, in early Head Start, we have a home visitation option. There's a center-based or home-based. And in the home visiting program, we have several of our home visitors that were parents that were inspired by their own home visitor to go back to school, get their degree, and now they are doing the job.
The paying the bills part, being a nonprofit 501c3, you rely on the kindness of strangers. Now, there's some pretty prominent names that I have seen around this building, so I get that part. What do you hope others can do to, make this work go further?
Well, there's so many things. Of course, we love donations, and you can go on our website and donate. But what we really want is to create awareness of the potential of children in our city, to understand that, don't judge a book by its cover, to understand where trauma might be impacting people's lives, and to look at people as we do with boundless potential to achieve success.
Okay, so the website?
www.children'sinstitute.org. It's a mouthful, but children'sinstitute.org.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, and congratulations on all the wonderful work that you're doing. And I'm very excited to have the chance to talk to you. It's up to all of us to help end the tragedy of homelessness, and no one takes this more seriously than the Union Rescue Mission. helping men, women, and children get off the streets by providing food, shelter, counseling, and long-term recovery programs. CEO Reverend Andy Bales shares his views with Anita Bennett on the mission's work and invites us all to get involved.
The homelessness crisis here in Los Angeles continues to make headlines, and lately it's been stirring even more debate. Joining me now to discuss this issue is Reverend Andy Bales. You are the CEO of the Union Rescue Mission. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you, Anita.
So let's start by talking about the pandemic. How has that affected the homeless population at the mission?
Overall, the pandemic, I think, added, unfortunately, 20,000 people to our streets. But at the mission, it hit us really hard. We had to decompress. In other words, we went from about 1,250 under our roof to down to about 280, and then began to rebuild.
The shelter is located on Skid Row.
Right in the heart of Skid Row, always has been for 131 years in Los Angeles.
How closely do you work with the city government in terms of getting those services to the people that need them?
We coordinate with the city. We don't accept any funding. Funding from the city or county requires a harm reduction policy where alcohol and drugs are free to flow, and we believe completely in recovery. So we do not take any city or county funding because of our focus on recovery.
In terms of decentralization, I talk to so many people, and people don't want those services in their neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So how do you balance the needs of the unhoused with the residents, the renters, the homeowners?
We believe in decentralizing, so we were successfully able to overcome neighborhood opposition. Let me just put it that way. We finally overcame, and we moved into Hope Gardens, transitional housing for single moms with kids, and senior housing, permanent supportive housing for seniors. And the neighbors now love us. One neighbor went from saying we were going to be a human trash heap to now coming to tears and saying, if those moms and kids weren't here, I don't know where they would be. So total heart change by the neighborhood. We assured them of good management, that it would be all about recovery and not a free flow of alcohol and drugs. And we were welcomed. So I believe with good management, good security, we can overcome NIMBY and have YIMBY start to happen in NIMBY. Even our city.
Not in my backyard,
right.
NIMBY. What are your thoughts on some of the cabin communities and other supportive housing opening across Los Angeles? Because I went to the opening of one in Reseda, and people were out, residents were protesting.
Yeah, well, again, I think the reason they're protesting is because, unfortunately, we are spending far too much money per unit, up to $840,000 per unit for a studio unit. One project will open with $1 million units, and when those $1 million units open, alcohol and drugs and gang activity will freely flow. And I know policymakers think that somehow the drug trade is innocent and victimless and nonviolent, but that's not the way it works. I was walking down the streets, and a guy comes running out of a building downtown and says, "Who are you guys?" And I told him who we were. He said, "If you want to do something, stop the drug gangs from moving into our apartments, kicking us out, and selling drugs from our apartments." Anita, I only tweeted this, right? What I heard and what I saw. The activists on Skid Row told me I was demonizing gang members. A gang across the street came over and warned our dock worker to tell his boss to shut up about us. And that night I had the commander of the police in my office watching the drug trade. And they not only caught the drug trade, but the supplier, because that's the reality of the streets.
It's a multi-pronged issue, homelessness. Yes. You talked about the activists, and the activists were very upset that the city just passed a new law, a resolution banning encampments from within 500 feet of schools and daycare centers. What are your thoughts on that?
I understand their frustration, because our city and county get warned by a judge to immediately provide shelter and housing to everybody on the streets of Skid Row. What do? We don't comply. We go to court, and then meanwhile, a near billionaire shows up and convinces the city to immediately start criminalizing encampments. Well, that's not the answer either. We need to both immediately shelter and house, and we need to start enforcing encampments once we've created enough shelter and housing for people. We never do that. We always jump right to the enforcement encampments, but I do agree we have to clean up encampments around schools. We have to protect kids. Even the superintendent of LAUSD schools showed up and talked about what dangers and what unfortunate education that they're facing.
To school.
Yeah, they're learning things they should never have to face.
In terms of the people at the mission, do you have a number, a percentage of them that move to permanent housing eventually?
Yes, since we created the Gateway program, which teaches responsibility, helps people with budgeting, we were averaging about 900 people per year moving into housing out of, let's say, 1,000 a night. But now that we're about half of that, I believe we hit about 450 people. And that may seem small, but it's working. When we set up Hope Gardens, we know moms are moving not only from Hope Gardens into permanent housing, but they're saving between $12,000 and $17,000 before they move out and are able to get a job and move out, never to experience homelessness again. Even our Gateway program, our Step Up Shelter program, people can stay as long as it takes to get on their feet. And if they have an income, we ask them to pay $150 per month. That's free room and board and 3 meals a day and clinics and learning center and all kinds of opportunities. 24/7, they have the shelter bed. They can rest during the day, never have to leave. I went back to my early days of running a mission because I learned everything I learned from a man who had a 4th grade education, George Holloway, and he believed people feel better about themselves if they live in a sober environment. In fact, he thought the only way to get sober was to be in a sober environment. They feel better about themselves when the food is good, and they feel much better about themselves when they pay part of their own way. And this is part of someone. It's about 1/5 of what it takes to house and feed somebody a day. So they pay part of their own way, and it teaches ownership and budgeting responsibility.
That's really interesting. You told me a few years ago that you had a staph infection in one of your legs. That was from Skid Row, correct?
Yes, this right leg, I had a wound. I got a kidney transplant. My wife gave me her kidney on Valentine's Day, and I got in the habit of walking. I set every record for walking at the hospital. So I signed my wife and I up for a small triathlon. 5 weeks after our kidney transplant, we did the triathlon, and I got a blister from doing the triathlon. Well, I was trying to heal a wound that had developed from that blister, and it was almost healed. But in my wound boot, I was out doing a water walk, and I came in contact with human waste on the streets of Skid Row. And I got 3 flesh-eating diseases, E. coli, staph, and strep. And it began, I went in the hospital for that for 4 days, 104 temperature, blood poisoning, and I came out in a wheelchair. Then, living with one leg, wore out my other leg, and I had to lose this last year. I didn't share that story for about a year because I was worried, because my board often gets nervous when I share health stories, and they start a succession plan. But I knew at the time that the city might be alerted to something if I shared what happened to me. And so I shared the story, and it made the downtown news and several other stories about me getting a flesh-eating disease from the streets of Skid Row from human waste. At that time, there were 2,800 people sharing 9 toilets, 184 toilets shy of a minimum standard for a Syrian refugee camp. If that's, I mean, that's the way Skid Row compares to the rest of the world. There are more people now, double or more people now, only a few more toilets now, so we still have a human tragedy happening on Skid Row.
I'm just amazed that you are able to stay motivated with the despair that you see on a daily basis, what you've been through, and yet you continue to work towards helping the homeless. So we applaud you and we thank you.
I do that because of the lives change that I see every day. People overcoming addictions, living a new life. It's worth every effort.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Reverend Andy Bales. This is LA Currents. I'm Anita Bennett. Thank you for watching and have a great day.